The other aspect was around the annuity that was paid with regards to the lakes, and it used to be £6,000. That was first awarded in 1923 and didn't take effect until about 1928, and that £6,000 wasn't adjusted over the years until in 1972 when they reviewed that, and the Minister Mata was the one who was instrumental in that, and it became from £6,000 to $22,000. So that was a real issue in terms of the equity and with that particular fund. I'll just pause there. Ka mioti hoki atu ki a koe peta. He loro o te wā i whakatautau. Just acknowledging Peter Tapsel, who was a board member of the Te Awa Māori Trust Board as well at the time. So he remembers some of these exciting kōrero we had. The other issue we had too was around the exclusion of the land around the lakes. Now, many of the lakes in the Rotorua are either reserves administered by the councils or by DOC. All of the islands within the lakes, they were administered mainly by DOC. None of them came back under the settlement as well. And when you think about some of the important lakes and the islands particularly, and with our main one out here, Mokoia. Gee, I paused there. Did you read the paper this morning? Somebody in Auckland has branded their beer Hinamo and Mokoia. Jeez. Yeah? Is that another treaty claim? Anyway, it's made me hoa. I thought I'd put it out there so you can get hoa too. The other one that wasn't part of the settlement was the Oho Channel, and that has a lot of issues as well for Ngāti Piki particularly. That connection from Rotorua to Rotoiti had been manually reconfigured to make the flow better and to allow the transfer of boats between the two lakes. So that's still an outstanding hoa for them. When we talked about the post-settlement, the issues that arose for the new trust board that was put in place was we never had the water returned. It was the lake beds and the lake beds only. So how do we use what was in the legislation to try and resolve that issue as well? But also, he whakahoki te rangatiratanga, te mana o te awa, mō ngā moana roto. So that was the big challenge for the trust, and it's been an ongoing one. And at this point in time, it hasn't been fully resolved. The other area there that was a real challenge for the board, that there were not just about the environmental matters, there was also the social, cultural aspects of our people that they had to have regard for. And when you pause and look at the Pūtea settlement that came back, it wasn't enough over the period of time to address those issues as well. What other opportunities could the board look at through the settlement to address that matter as well? This is organisation structure at the moment, very lean and mean. And it's a matter of how do you access other resourcing, including our own expertise, to assist in those areas, particularly in the environmental portfolio. 14 lakes. There are currently 5 lake plans. There are 7 lake management groups. There are 4 lake management plans that are yet to be ratified. Plus there are all the other issues around the use of the lakes as well. So how do you properly resource Te Arawa to be able to do that? And here's the biggest oha for us. There's the ownership. That part there, that's what Te Arawa owns. And it was our claim all the way through to the centre of the earth. There's a proviso, an exception to that, however, except the minerals. So the water column in the airspace above is not owned by Te Arawa. No one owns the water. The Prime Minister has been saying that consistently. And no one owns the airspace above it. Well, hang on. Have you had a look at the Tuwharetua settlement? Have you had a look at the discussions they're having around the Whanganui settlement? So why is there differences in various claims with regards to the ownership of water and airspace? Tuwharetua, for example, have the right to administer that. That includes any flights over the lake. They can charge a levy for a plane to fly over the lake. Maybe something we need to talk with them about, incorporate into our settlement as well. The real area that we have to address some of these inequities is through the cultural redress. There are a lot of components of the settlement, but this one in particular allows us to hone in on us as Te Arawa and our relationship with the lakes themselves. So we got those 30 lake beds back. There was only the lake bed, of course. Do we have a right in terms of any other uses? And I'll cover that throughout the presentation as well. Now, the return of Lake Okaro. This has been another real challenge. The District Council, albeit at the original discussions, accepted that Lake Okaro would come back to Te Arawa. During the time of the original discussions, there's been two changes in leadership in that period of time, both the mayoral and CEO. And the second change in mayoral and CEO leadership argued that we only needed to have a MOU protocol between us in terms of the lake. The new mayor came in 2 years ago, made a formal announcement down at Papaiaoru that the Rotorua Lakes Council have agreed to give back Lake Okaro to Te Arawa. That's the beginning of the process. Any of you who have been through such a long, drawn-out, frustrating engagement with government, that's what's happening at this moment. So we're waiting for the final comments from the government with regards to handing back Lake Okaro. Proprietary rights. You don't have ownership rights, but you could have proprietary rights. There are a lot of examples of that happening already. There are a lot of examples of, other than ownership, but business rights. It's been one of the challenges for not only us, but iwi throughout the country. And Linda, in her presentation, and with the experiences over there as well. Similarly, with the dams along the Waikato River. And again, with Tuwharetua and RokuMihinui. So how do we, again, try to work together to achieve those? The last one was the Te Arawa Crown relationship. You know, I used to joke that I used to have a beautiful head of hair. And then Peter used to joke that he had a beautiful black head of hair. And as trust board members, we have to work with the government. My God, forget all of that stuff. And that's just putting it mildly. Te Arawa Crown relationship, oh sorry. I just keep my bottle of water over. This is not from the lake, by the way, otherwise I would have taken it. One of the key leverages we have within our settlement are the statutory acknowledgements. This is the only area, quite frankly, that gives effect and recognises Te Arawa relationship with the lakes. In any engagement activities on the lakes, this is what's quoted and has to be had regard for. So when councils are processing resource consents, they must notify the applicant about these statutory acknowledgements. As we process those consents as well, we need to test that consent against those statutory acknowledgements. And I can say it's been really hard, personally trying to apply that, particularly when there's a mindthink amongst other stakeholders in this, including councils, who have their own legal requirements and even their own mindthink around how they apply those legal requirements, or more importantly, how they have regard for the statutory acknowledgements. There have been a number of examples where that we've had here in Rotorua, where consents were granted that were quite contrary to those statutory acknowledgements. And to get redress on those takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and you get really caught up with it. And I want to acknowledge Heather Smith, who was in that space for quite a few years for us, thanking her for doing a lot of that labor for us. The other one too is environmental court. Although we haven't really gone there yet in terms of the Te Arawa Lakes Trust, there have been other areas where, particularly Ngāti Pikiau, Ngāti Makino, challenged the resource consent for the wastewater treatment plant out at Rotuiti Rotomā. And one of the basis of the evidence was the statutory acknowledgements. And the short outcome was they won that case against the council, and the wastewater treatment location has been withdrawn. They're still in discussions now in a more open collaborative process trying to arrive at a decision there. The other one that I'd like to cite too was Taniwha Springs, Ngāti Rangiwiwi's case. Again, statutory acknowledgements were used as part of the evidence as well. So those are two examples that we can fall back on to say that authorities recognised and decided, or decisions were based on those statutory acknowledgements. Now, managing the lakes. They set up the Rotorua Te Arawa Lake Strategy Group under the Lake Settlement, where the three partners, the Regional Council, District Council and Te Arawa, were charged with addressing the water quality issues, fundamentally. And we approached the Ministry for the Environment and were able to secure some pūtea to assist us with that. As part of the agreement, they needed one entity to be the financial manager, if you like, of that pūtea, and the Regional Council currently carries out that role. But in terms of that pūtea, is that truly being used in terms of addressing all the issues around lakes water quality? For example, are they proactive in the addressing individual hapu, iwi, whānau issues within their own regions? That's a question I'll leave hanging out. Land Information New Zealand, or LINZ. Now they're the ones who hold the ownership, management rights of the water column and the airspace on behalf of the government. So Te Arawa Lakes Trust and LINZ have been working closely together to put together protocols and even processes for resource consents for us to administer. So the process for resource consent gets lodged with the Regional Council. Hang on, I'll pause there. It used to be done by the District Council, and the Regional Council didn't know that. Our settlement at the time exposed this discrepancy in terms of the management of the Resource Management Act. While they were given a certain mandate to carry out some of the resource management responsibilities, they actually took over the processing of resource consents. That was quite a shock to everybody at the time, and I can say particularly Crown Law, who were there to make sure that the legalities of the settlement were pretty transparent. So we've had those things to deal with as well. And Land Information New Zealand has been really useful in terms of putting together the protocols, because quite frankly, Land Information New Zealand and Te Arawa Lakes Trust are the owners of the lakes. I'll come to that a bit later. So we've got these protocols too to adopt. MFISH, Ministry for the Environment, Ministry of Primary Industry now, and Ministry of Arts and Culture and Heritage. Now the last one is quite an interesting one, because under the cultural redress, we need to identify those areas of cultural significance for Te Arawa. So we've been slow in that area of work. mainly because we've been distracted by the hands-on stuff rather than gathering the information to do that. Jim Schuster has been pretty critical in his work, as he's recognised as a member of the ministry, and also just his wider knowledge. We have engaged with Te Arawa to signal that as well. There's some good information in our minutes from certain where people have shared that relationship that hapu or whānau have with that area. So the next step is to collate all that together. There are some of the other organisations we had to have relationships with. Transit New Zealand. Why? All of their roads and their drains go straight into the lakes. Really? Are they getting charged for that? The council know that? Is that water being tested? We then brought in Niwa, and we used them as a tool, respectfully, because of their knowledge and the ability to test the science in terms of a lot of the cultural reduce issues we had, but also just really around the water quality itself and our Te Arawa interaction with the water and the lakes. And there's a couple of projects that they did that I'll bring up a bit later as well. The other big one was place names. And I remember clearly Joe Malcolm, Sam Hauna, Kathy Jews, Anurangi Hewea, and Tua Bright, and a couple of the other older board members sat down, used to get them in a room, and they started going through the various lakes and the place names that were there. Now, for example, one of the most famous lakes in Rotorua was Blue Lake. Blue Lake. Yeah. And when you look at what the real name is, Tiki Tapu. Oh my geez. So again, a bit like some of the kōrero that you've already heard around the interpretation. You know, Rangi's kōrero around, I think, Matariki was brilliant in terms of that's how language can be changed and altered by putting a Western lens or interpretation on it. Again, similar with our lakes too. Some of the areas of significance around the lakes have been given different names, bays in particular, and Te Ariki Mori, who was one of the ones who was very vocal about recapturing those names. The caveat though, and the caution, was that once you start identifying those Te Arawa names, and you translate those Te Arawa names, there's pretty significant sites, particularly if they're urupa. So how do you safeguard those areas as urupa, but ensure that the mana of those who were buried there and their whānau are recognised as well? Again, one of those testers. And the other one was around cultural harbours. And I remember my mum used to make pipi all the time. Well, actually, no. Me and my sisters used to make pupils all the time. And one of the hōhā jobs was going to get the paru. The paru is the mud that dyes the threads to give the black colouring in the pupae. And you have to have the right spot for the paru because it's a mixture of water and all the vegetation that gradually break down and form the paru. And if you go to different areas, you get different types of paru too. So you had to know where those areas were. A few of those were within the lakes. So it was one of those particular cultural practices that has been recognised within the settlement. The other one also is the material that we used, including raupo pāpā for housing. Did you know that we had insulation well before Western people knew about it? The raupo was the best insulation in the world. That's why the whare around here were only little, and then they had one more, because the raupo kept the heat in and the cold out, and vice versa during summer. Really give us some control of the lakes as our freshwater fishery regulations. Now, the Te Arawa Lakes Trust has signed off on the bylaws. They are now going to be lodged with Ministry of Primary Industry. We will go through about a 9 to 10 month process of negotiation, is that the right word? A negotiation with the Crown to arrive at what those regulations will look like. Well, what that does is give back to Te Aroha the management of those taonga species. And you might be looking at that, moriuna, taonga species, moriuna? Yeah, well, I thought the same too. Because if you ever tried them, my God, they're yuck and they're bones, you know, and they're sticking you, and unless you've got someone who knows how to cook them, they're really yuck. A bit like the kate, yeah? Anyway, and when we went around to our people and said, these are the taonga species we've identified, it was our pakeke that added in the moriana. The moriana became a very vital source of food, particularly during the Depression. Okay? So that's why they had they identified it as a taonga species. They're nice if you put them in the hangi waka. The other one about the regulations, however, is that environmental sustainable practices. Now that's going to be really huge. Your fish aren't going to be healthy if the environment's not healthy. So how do we redress one without redressing the other? So that's a strand of work that's yet to come. One of the biggest challenges we're going to have is the custody only take. If you listen to Lara's kōrero, when she was talking about those particular cases, when you identify a person or people, then you're not likely to get buy-in from the government. But if you identify the activity or the benefits, then you're more likely to get buy-in. So maybe we need to look at rewording those regulations rather than to say Te Aroha are the only ones who can take these species. But for the sustainable outcome of these species, these practices will be put in place. The other one is management committees. How do you do that? 40 lakes. You have one, at the moment we've got Committee Whakahaere. They're responsible for all of those lakes. And they're going to be appointing rangers or pautiria to carry out that work as well. Is that enough? One committee? Should we look at committees for each of the lakes or clusters of lakes? Should we look at committees that might be more reflective of those hapu or iwi of Te Aroha that have a relationship with those lakes? Again, work in progress around the fishery rings. Then appointing of pautiria. Already that's become quite obvious. Those who are passionate about fishing, albeit catching trout, still fishing, I suppose. They're the ones who are more likely to be out there monitoring who's catching the taonga species and are they compliant with the regulations that have been put in place. So here's some of the research we've done. One of the key ones is around mahinga kai. That's why it's at the top there. We had a joint project with Niwa, and we had a cohort group originally of 30 odd of our Te Aroha people. And one of the startling and probably alarming findings was that if you eat trout, see, not a taonga species, but if you eat trout at least once a day, you'll die of mercury poisoning within 2 years. So if that's in the trout, would that be the same in our taonga species? Because none of those who were part of the cohort group could say they were regular eaters of our taonga species. At SWAPA, so Sustainable Water Program of Action, and actually the first person who put that out publicly was Willie Dowell. Interesting kōrero he had yesterday, eh? That particular work has been evolving to now where we're at in terms of rights and interests in freshwater. Freshwater management, that's part of that kōrero, and you've heard some really good speakers talk about that already. LEARNS, it's a lake program, a research program. It's a joint one with Waikato University, NIWA, a couple of other research institutes to look at lake water quality, how best to manage that. And it's been funded through government. We're part of the cohort group that are looking at that work now. Bioprospecting. Now, Te Taru Musia and Te Taru Wai, he was appointed the chair of Te Aroa Collective to deal with all the applications that were coming through here. So when someone was looking for minerals, and let's put it out there, gold and those types of valuable minerals, we just get notified if we got that at all. And then they'd go and do this study to see whether those minerals were here. So anyway, Te Aroa said, nah, no more of that. Set up a committee. Te Taru, you give Simon Bridges the bash when he comes here. He's the minister of this. And we need to put in place a monitoring program for that. So we have that. So we have that set up now. And by the way, the region covered is the Waialiki region. So that goes right through down the coast. One of the biggest explorations that has occurred was around Koura. Taukoura, Te Aroa Taukoura. Real good story here. You heard Lara talk about Western adoption of our whakaaro and to capture it their way. The Taukoura, for those who don't know, it's like a long line with bunches of broom that sit in the water, and the koura come and they gravitate to that area for a safe environment. So our people used it as a fishing net. Once the koura gathered there, they pulled it all up and they had a big feed of koura. Well, Ian Kusevs, Nihoki Kia, and Willie Emery, they, in conjunction with the Regional Council, thank you Regional Council for the put there towards that, used the tau to measure other environmental aspects. And NIWA became involved in that as well. And this really intelligent NIWA scientist went overseas and did a presentation at an international conference and claimed the tau as a Western scientific tool to measure water quality and other aspects of the lake. She got the bash. Not quite literally, but we have held NIWA accountable for that. We had a formal statement made by them. Of course, it's too late, cat's out of the bag. We reviewed all our contracts with NIWA. I wrote the intellectual property clause myself. If you don't sign this, you don't have no contracts with us. So there's another learning. Real good work around the tau, but someone else takes it and uses it for their own benefit. The contaminants in Kai, I talked about that. That was from Kiu to Kai, so from the lakes all the way through to the sea. The cohort group we had, and we did that in conjunction with Ngaitahu were doing the same as well, and Ngāti Hoko from Whakatane. So there were three iwi that were involved in that. What are our people eating? How healthy are they for them? And how healthy are those species now? Another one of the findings that came out was around the watercress. There was another one that could have serious health implications for you, particularly the water quality. Now, with the watercress, it was extracting all the minerals from the water. So it was filtering the water, creating better water quality, but if you ate it, then there was some risks there. Now, macrophytes, there's those little bugs in the water. And I just want to pause here and acknowledge Miriana Wilson from Ministry for the Environment. At the moment, we're doing, how adventurous we are. We approached MFE and said, look, we've got this program of work, and we've got this framework we're looking at. Would you be interested in assisting us to try and flesh out that framework, but also to capture some of the science around the water as well? So Miliana's been training our education and training unit, our students, how to measure water quality. One of them is the macrophytes, and what sort of bugs in there tells you what the quality of the water is, apart from other things. They got this bazooka as well. They got a skipping rope, a couple of other things, and it's from the Schmack kit. It's a fully recognised water testing tool that NIWA have produced. So she's training our rangatahi to do that. They went out again yesterday. We've improved their IT ability to do that by providing tablets. So when they're doing the testing and get the results, they immediately download them onto the tablet to capture that information, which comes straight back to our centralized system. And I want to acknowledge Tim. Tim's our brother from South Africa. He's more of a rebel than most of you are. And he's put together the data capture system. Now, this one has real potential for all of us, not only environmentally, but it can capture the requirements and data for our fishery regulations. And the last part we're working on right now is resource consents. Get a resource consent in, this is the theory. Theory can work. Get that consent in, you load it into the system, and from all the other data you have, it pulls that information relevant to that site. So we don't have to go out, get a cold wet bum out of Rokumihinui, just checking that particular site, can do that, and it could be GPS as well. So that's some of the work that they're doing in this area. So vermicomposting. Now this is an interesting one, because a real economic potential there. What it is, get rid of that lake weed that's in there clogging our lakes, put it on the land, convert it to compost. That's quite a simplistic explanation. They're doing it in Tuwhareturu, in Mokai. They're doing it quite successfully, and the trials that were run here, particularly the additive was waste chip from Kawerau Mill, added another flavour, if you like, to the compost. So that's some of the projects, research we're doing. They're up and running now. We looked seriously at the wastewater treatment plant that was set up over at Maketu, and with the runoff from there to use that as well, and the seaweed or the lake weed as a further filtration before the water permeates down through the land. Now here's the real juicy parts, the engagements. So these are all the different groups that we've been engaging with, and these are the ones that are recognised, that we've recognised we must have a relationship to give effect to our settlement. It's been a real tough journey for all of us, mainly because of capacity, being able to attend to all of the different meetings, all the different engagements, to be able to read and be knowledgeable about all that information so you can have an intelligent, informed debate when you attend those particular engagements. And one of probably the positives for me in that list there was the Ngā Matakōkiri review. I want to acknowledge Rapeta Tāna, he's the chair, I think, of the new group, the new name of that group. We worked with the late Maureen Waka, and it was to review Māori representation on councils. Ngā Matakōkiri was the national body of Māori representatives on councils, and we assisted with the review. Why was that rewarding? Because she actually started to understand the politics that were affecting how we were going to give or not effect to our settlement. And I must say I was pretty naive to think that you could go and sit down at a table and the person you're looking at, I believe, talking to, is going to give you a respectful and honest answer and abide by that. The use of language. Yeah, not those other words, language. The other one I really enjoyed too was Te Whare Tāma, or Te Arawa. They were setting up with a museum, and it was, we worked with Jimmy Schuster to look at where a lot of the Te Arawa Tāma that were housed in other museums and bring them back here as much as possible, or at least put together a record of those and where they were housed. And one of the hikoi we had was a couple of years ago. We went to visit Hinamihi Marae, Whare Tupuna over in England, and we also went to visit Laulu over in Germany. We also found that there was another one, Te Māori used to sit at the Government Gardens, was also over there in another museum. So, these are some taonga that none of us knew were overseas. Rauru, for example, had been 100 years in a German museum. Amazing, eh? So any of the others, they're pretty much operational ones. The biggest one down there at the moment, lake structures. Under our settlement, there was a 10-year holiday granted for all existing structures. What did that mean? That they could stay in existence in their current form until we were able to put together a policy. But the catch in terms of that as well, under Section 32 of the settlement, Te Aroha Lakes Trust has no right to decline any existing structure. So all of those 670-something structures on the lakes, those are jetties and ramps and that, we don't have a right to decline them. What up with that? Wakawoki te mana? Yeah, right. So that's another real challenging one, and we've got a team together working how we can try and redress that. Here's the main authorities that we're engaging with, and I congratulate the regional council for this particular conference. It's a long time coming, quite frankly, in terms of our own interactivity with our environment. The other one there, the Harbour Master. Now the navigation bylaws are up for review. I think submissions have closed on them, but within those bylaws, the Harbour Master has authority over and above Te Aroha Lakes Trust settlement. How the hell did that happen? Again, another anomaly of the settlement. So what we need to do is work with the Harbour Master to see how best we can give effect to both their roles in terms of safety on the lakes, but also the mama of Te Aroha. The last one down there is what a quality focus group. That's only a new one that started in the last couple of years. And what they're looking at is, again, Kiutiki Tai, all the catchments from pretty much the lakes through to the sea. They've divided up those catchments, criteria they've identified. How do you manage the water within those catchments? Who should be responsible for them? Who are the stakeholders that need to have a right of say in them? That's the work that's happening at the moment too. That one, by the way, has real potential. And an overarching group of that is the Water Advisory Panel that's been set up by the Regional Council. It's a mini or regional replication of the Land and Water Forum at the national level. Here's the other one, Western Bay Planning District Council. We used to have a lot of involvement at Makitu. About 78%, I think, is the percentage of land in Makitu owned by the Te Aroha Lakes Trust. Over the years, however, the Whakaue ki Makitu, Te Aroha ki Makitu, have set up their own groups, and there's been a transition of responsibility or administration back to them in these engagements. One of the ones at the moment they're looking at is the rediversion of the Kaituka River back into Onaroto estuary. There's some of the things we do with our people. Not only you got to deal with the authorities, you must have engagements with our people. And like I do, there's always going to be the most exciting, more often than not. And we're always on the same page, and it just takes 5 minutes, click, we all sign off on it. And they haven't finished yet either. So a couple in there I threw in just to elevate and give us some hope. It was around the Institute Directors Training that the Lakes Trust put on for many of our trustees. By the way, it was very beneficial for those that did attend, and it's made a difference in terms of their own roles in administration of lands for and on behalf of the owners. That had an awesome one. We've got heaps of photos of that over the last 4 years we've been running. It really acknowledges our pakeke 65 years of age and over. Note 65 years of age and over. We've had 61, 62 say, well, I'm nearly there. Well, you're not dead. You're not dead, so go away. And we put on for them a wall. And there's a theme every time we have it. And the last one we had only a couple of weeks ago was black and white. And the photos from there are awesome. So if you ever want to have a look at some of those pakeke, and gee, you know, I didn't realise that they can flash up pretty good. They really look good, and they're really enjoying themselves too. So there is a king and queen announced on the night too. We might have to drop the age actually, because we're running out of 65 plus. The other one I want to mention there that started in a joint venture with Tāria Tahana and Arakata was the Te Ranga Takapu. And that was pretty much a leadership development program for our people. That's been really good. And from there, a lot of those original participants have been appointed or elected to the Tatau Te Arawa, which is the body set up by Te Arawa to have the joint relationship with the council, actually to offset pro-democracy. Well, the last one down there at the bottom is E Tu Whānau. Now that one's starting to get a real momentum. What is E Tu Whānau? It's about our whānau trying to address their own issues and getting them some support for that. The other one was, it's not okay. One of those particular campaigns. They're all part of the same thing. So we've been working quietly with different groups. The last big event we had was the Te Koutu Mai Kainga, was the recognition of the formal name, the original name, Again, easier to drop the te and just leave the Koutu. So Te Koutu is the proper name of that region. And there was a combination of renaming and reclaiming. And the other aspect of it was the Niaglasi memorial. It was held around the time that Niaglasi was killed. And she was killed in the area of Te Koutu. So it's about community starting to take control of those things as well. As a result of that, they've set up a rangatahi support watch group in Te Koutu. They've identified 3 safe houses throughout that particular community that anybody who feels at risk can go and feel safe for their own safety. So these are some of the guiding documents that we use in our engagement. But probably a more important one at this stage is the last one. Now here are this is the moi moia of our board at the moment. Let's reach for the heights of the heavens. Well, that's my translation. That's the overarching objective. And the other ones are breakdowns of how to achieve that. And if you look at that second one, doesn't that resonate specifically with this kaupapa for the last 2 days? If the water's that clear, you can see the footprints of the koura in the lake. Wow, that's a real aspiration for all of us. So these are our board's priorities and memoria. And how are we going to give effect to that? Well, we engage with our people. I always enjoy telling the story. We go out there and say, you tell us what would be a framework that we can use to identify and capture your relationship with the lakes. Te Arawa's cultural relationship with the lakes was one of the outstanding areas of work in the settlement. And we had 3 hui, and we had online, then we had another couple of hui, 3 follow-up. Anyway, we were at the tākinga, we got a bit brassed off because all of these tangas and manas values keep coming up time and again, and Lara is so correct. Even our Māori names words have been used and transferred and translated by Pākehā for their own means. So he said, nah, no more tangas and angas. What's important for Te Arawa? And we looked at our whakapapa. And you look at, when Te Arawa waka was coming over from Hawaii, and they got caught in the whirlpool, te korokoro o te parata. We nearly captured them. But we didn't, we survived, and we were able to get to Aotearoa, New Zealand. So that was one of our first significant engagements and relationship with water. And the other one was, well, how many years has Te Arawa been living around these lakes and been interacting with these lakes? Surely we know enough about that through our whakapapa, our mātauranga and kōrero tawhito. And once we got that, then how do we put that together? Put that whakapapa together to advise us around the framework. Who are we? Where do we come from? Sometimes we forget that. And then once we've got that, what are the values that can assist us to achieve this framework with the key components? And then how do you put that into practice? And then how do you maintain te mana o te wai in all of those processes? So the tūpapa o te wai is to give effect to te mana o te wai. And te mana o te wai, there was some discussion about that terminology, by the way, but there was te mana, te mauri. There's acceptance that both have equal value. And you can use it, if you're comfortable, use one or the other, and ke apa. And these were the key things. It must be consistent with our values. It must give effect to those values. It must make those positive changes. And it must provide the leadership going forward. You might be able to see this, but we have this if you want. And what our people came up with was a framework that was based on wai. So, ko te teiteitanga o te tuapapa, ko te wai. Ko te papa sua rua, ko te wai ariki. Mai maki tuki tongariro, te rohe, ko te ingoa, wai ariki. E whakapākea, ura of the gods. Te papa tuatoru, wai ora. The health and well-being. Wai rua, the spiritual aspects of the water, but also of our people. Twice. And waiata, the kōrero, the stories, the waiata, the songs about Te Arawa's relationship with the water and our lakes. Koina te tuapapa o ngā wai o Te Arawa. Tēnā koutou Te Arawa mō kōrero e whakatika tēnā tuapapa. This particular framework, by the way, no other iwi hapu have something that comes close to this. And it was a revelation, talking about Miriana and some of the work we're doing at that higher level, that part of their responsibility is environmental reporting. And that means where are iwi hapu whānau in terms of that engagement with the environment. A framework like this gives real potential for that to be put into practice. So where do you go from here? Oh, by the way, that's right, we've got a water claim in there, 1875. So Toby Curtis and Willie Henry lodged that on behalf of the ownership of all the water in the lakes, rivers, tributaries and puna. The board have agreed to pursuing that through the tribunal on hold to see what the outcomes of the engagement with the iwi leaders around the freshwater. Return of Lake Okaro, I can tell you, I did a Section 40 report. What's that? Put together all the information required to prove Te Arawa ownership of their lake, see the truth. I've got a response. Thank you for putting that information together. We'll get back to you in due course. Due course, yeah, right? Anyway, Te Arawa fishery rigs, I just gave you an update about that. So by February, March of next year, those bylaws should be legislation, but that's the time frame. The other area of work is around the plans and policies, and there was a good kōrero from Lara around the NPS, National Policy Statement, and regional policy statements, and how some of that interpretation has been given, particularly around the cases she identified. The active engagement in the lakes program, that's pretty hard out. But if you're not there, decisions will be made without you. One of the ones that come to the fore was the Lake Rotorua Catchment Management Plan, where we spent 2.5 years with all the landowners working through how their land use could be changed so that the nutrient levels entering in the lakes could be reduced to the minimum level that had been set by the council. We have finally signed off on the plan. Unfortunately, the accord that captures the landowners, the three partners of the Rotorua Te Arawa Lake Strategy Group, has not been signed by one of the partners. What are the implications for that? And the other one is embed that Te Tuapapa. That's really important, you know, that any person who wants to have an activity on the lake, they need to have regard for their tuapapa, but be able to understand it. You know, we can't be arrogant and say, if you don't understand Te Arawa values, well, that's your problem. No, it becomes our problem, because it'd be a litigious problem that'll cost us a lot of money. So, you know, let's be magnanimous and translate for them. Because if we translate for them in our terminology, then we're more likely to be on the same page with them, rather than them to adopt their own. And the last one, not least, Te Arawa coordinated approach. We can't achieve piecemeal areas of work for the greater Te Arawa good. We've got to come together, particularly in the area of the environment, and work together. And at the moment there are about 4 or 5 different Te Arawa groups through their settlements that have mana rangatiratanga over lakes in one way, shape or form, and on water. So how do we work together so that we get the best outcome for us? Koenei te wā whakamutunga e kōrera tuki a koutou, mo reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou.